Oh yeah, new series. Just gonna be like playing old games and just talking really. Um, yeah, that's it. So today's topic's probably just gonna be about like self-perception because it's something that's obviously quite important. The way you perceive yourself or what you consider to be yourself. Obviously, everyone's got a different view of themselves depending on how maybe realistic or delusional or whatever you might say you are. Yeah, your perception of yourself will change. Obviously, you'll have moments where you feel like you are the dog's balls, and other times you'll feel like you're not all that. And so the result of which is ultimately that balance. Finding kind of comfort in yourself if you can. It's something that not a lot of people can actually do regularly. A lot of people are very unhappy with themselves for numerous reasons. There's a reason why like body dysmorphia and all these things are at an all-time high. And listen, we all know in these videos, social media is mentioned a lot. And that's because it's basically an accelerator for human nature. We get to see the best and the worst of human nature basically expressed through that. Through, well, yeah, social media, how cruel people can be to each other, also how lovely they can be, and well, ultimately, people are capable of great things. A lot of the time, out of jealousy and out of other reasons, people are incredibly harsh. And 9 times out of 10, the person that's harshest on yourself is, well, yours truly. It is yourself. So, being able to get to the point, ultimately, where you are comfortable with yourself, if that's even possible, because for some people it just isn't. Personally, as someone that very much struggles to align with themselves, it often feels like it is kind of an impossible task to then be content or happy with, seeing yourself in the reflection. Don't personally have any mirrors in the house besides the one at the toilet for shaving, because it's just like seeing yourself is something that it feels like we shouldn't be able to do. There was a philosopher that said that like one of the biggest like mistakes of an invention was the mirror, because then people got like self-obsessed and really conscious about the way they look, the way they feel, and oftentimes people don't want to be perceived, because, well, with the human brain being the way it is, we see negatives, we see threats, we see a lot of the darker side, and that's ultimately what's made us so successful at surviving. But at the same time, it's also led us to be quite unhappy in the modern day, because we're prescribing threats to things that aren't really threatening, just to life in general. And so it comes to an extent a problem when you're looking in the mirror and you can't recognize yourself, or you don't identify with the hands you look down at. And it's this kind of stuff in life that makes you feel, wow, this is all kind of like absurd. This is not meaningful. Like, this is not what living is. Being uncomfortable in your own body is something that no one should have to be, and yet a lot of people are. And this isn't just an allegory for people that are body dysmorphic in some way, or have body dysphoria, or gender dysphoria. It is a thing that a lot of people will have. We're speaking to a slightly older friend recently. He's approaching 43, and he was saying, like, whenever he looks in the mirror, he's just a little bit shocked, because he doesn't imagine himself as a balding 43-year-old man. He still sees himself as the 20-odd-year-old who, does this, that, and the other, and he just doesn't identify with himself. And personally, as someone that's, like, lightly schizophrenic, it's quite hard to look in the mirror and see anything looking back at you, because it's so kind of difficult to identify with a body, because naturally half the things you see are not only under scrutiny from yourself because you can't trust your own perception, but also to an extent it's confusing because the hands you're looking down at don't feel representative of a slowly fracturing kind of like reality. And that sounds unnecessarily edgy, and it doesn't mean to come across that way, but it's unnerving. Self-identity is obviously one of those things when it comes down to your perception of like gender or your sexuality or your even like race and religion and very personal things like that. When it comes down to that and you really start questioning yourself in those metrics as well, everyone will do it at some point. Not necessarily all of them things, but certain aspects of yourself you will ultimately end up questioning, or you should have done, maybe, if you're an adult, because it's, you know, it's existentializing is an important part of growing, really. Being able to question yourself and, is this the right thing to do? Or is this necessarily you in the first place? How do you feel represented? Are you represented by, you know, this type of body, or this type of hairstyle, or this type of religion, this type of language even, you know, all this kind of stuff that's very, or decently personal. And the expression of this, ultimately harshness of treatment of yourself comes from a self-referential point. And so while other people might not notice certain things that are very heavily playing on your mind, other people are kind of in their own heads too. It's the whole kind of necessary lead up to solipsism, which is the argument that you might well be the only person in existence because you only have access to your own brain. While that's not going to go that far, but just off the premise that you only have access to your own brain, think about everyone else who is also thinking about themselves primarily, because that's the first thing they can do. Now, obviously, that doesn't make you selfish. That just means the way you perceive the world is through a personal lens, because you can't really see it through other people's lenses. Now, you can empathize with them. You can, you know, hope that you perceive it in a similar way to be able to help someone else. But in reality, you can't do that. You know, it's not something you can just turn on a VR headset and see the world and feel the emotions of someone else. At least not yet. So we're in this interesting point where it's coming to balance with yourself and also, well, looking after you and yours. And, you know, being able to do so successfully ultimately is a merit of a good person. And it doesn't make you a bad person if you can't. There's multiple reasons why you might not be able to. You know, whether it's through, like, mental disorders, or if it's just the simple fact you don't know all the details about someone else. But this whole perception of the self and what it is to be, well, you, is something that maybe takes an entire lifetime sometimes to successfully do. So yeah, stick at it. You got it. Alright, bye-bye.